Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar for the new FDO. My name is Tracy Wexler, and I am the Director of Subscription Products. And joining me today is Dave Holmes. Dave?
Hi, I'm Dave Holmes. I'm the Cleveland lead for Foundation Center Midwest.
Alrighty, so we'd like to thank you for spending a scant hour with us. A little housekeeping is simply to say that this webinar will be recorded, and we are monitoring questions, so it's all good. And without further ado, I will get going. So the first thing that we wanted to do today is basically what we're going to cover. And it boils down for us for about 4 key questions. One, give you some insights as to why we did this. You've known and loved Classic FDO for a long time, so we're going to explain why we embarked on this journey to update the user interface. I also want to give you some insights as to all the changes that happened underneath the hood to make that possible. And we are very aware that the most important thing we can do today is show you how to use it so that you can just dive in there and know exactly with confidence how to get the most out of this latest iteration of FDO. And then, because in addition to the Director of Subscription Products, I'm also the product manager for FDO, I want to give you a little insight as to what's coming next. So, what made this all possible, really, was simply an enormous amount of infrastructure upgrades. So that really took 2 big bucket forms. One was that we really enhanced our ability in data processing. So how does that benefit FDO? Quite simply, it takes us from an organization that used to be able to process 200 to 300 grants a year. Now we're humming at a level where last year we processed 2 million grants. This year we're on track to process 4 million grants. So let me just clarify terms there for a little bit. When I say process grants, what we do is we look at grants that were awarded from foundations to nonprofits, and then we code them. We classify all of the language in the grant's description so that you can do a simple search like you do and find everything that, find all the funders who actually do work and fund work in your area, be it on subject matter, populations, geographic area. So that's what I mean by processing grants, right? We look at all that history and we make it robustly discoverable. Then the other thing that we had to do to make all of this possible was upgrade our search technology. So it's one thing to search a data set of, a couple of million grants, but when we're adding a couple to like 4 million grants a year, we really need to upgrade the search technology so that we get you the best set of results in a timely fashion. Now, why did we do it? So when you expand the data set as much as we did, it introduces almost another level of another problem to solve, right? How do you go and navigate through this much data, right? Because data is fine, but unless you can glean in a efficient way meaningful insights so that you can turn that into actions, all the data in the world's not going to help you. It just means that there's a whole lot of needles in that haystack, and how are you going to find what you need? So we needed to really change the UI so that, as we've come to understand, this is a small fraction of what you do every day, right? So we need to make this grant prospecting research as efficient as possible. So to do that, we just hunker down, we laser focus on the goals, and the goals simply, as we see it, the overarching goal for you is basically finding money. So if we keep that in sight as the thing that is most important for us to get to, everything we do galvanizes around that goal. And that means all of the things that help you do prospect research, we need to expose in a clear, concise way in a way that is intuitive to find and then intuitive to navigate through. There are all these sorts of things that come into prospect research, whether it's knowing who has RFPs, networking your way into foundations where you don't already have a relationship, finding those grant makers, understanding what they really do because you can see descriptions of those grants. All of this gets you to your fundraising goals, and we need to do that in a really intuitive way. So to do that, at core, FDO needed to make a journey from a database to an application. So when I say database, before in classic FDO, you would either search for grant makers or search for grants or search for 990s or search for companies. When in fact, let's get back to you're really looking to find money. So it is less important to go into each individual bucket, but to simply tell us what you're doing, tell us where you want to do it, then add layers of complexity if necessary. And we do all that work underneath the hood, so you don't have to go into the system in individual database silos, right? All of that comes together to form a meaningful application. So what does this do? What we hope, and based on our observations since we launched beta a couple of months ago, is that we have made great strides in significantly reducing the learning curve. So that matters to our existing customers for a number of reasons. Oftentimes, what happens is the person who's actually doing this prospect work, although the organization has subscribed to FDO for years, you're handing off these responsibilities to various people in your organization. A new person coming on to learn this, or a new person on your staff who takes over for someone who had done it for a long time, should be able to use this application with a minimal learning curve, right? The whole application and user interface should be more intuitive than our classic FDO was. So we've made great strides for that. We also want to provide you with more relevant results, right? So the underlying volume that we can process helps us do that, as does the search technology upgrades to get you through that information. And we'll show you on the results page some things that are possible now that weren't when we get into the demos. So then you're looking at a set of search results, you're looking at a grant maker profile. Rather than make you go through reams and reams and reams of text, let's make sure that those insights are front and center to you so that you can make a faster decision about whether that is a grant maker that you want to continue to invest your precious time in. So prioritize how we present the information so that the things that are most important for you to know are the easiest for you to see. And then those grant maker profiles, and we'll talk about recipient profiles as well, are really, the job of those profiles is to set you up so that you have done as much homework on the funder as you possibly can in one location, so that you are not only prepared to pitch what your organization does, which every one of you does with great passion and eloquence, but you also have a much better understanding of who that funder is so that you can tailor your pitch to what they do and what they support. You know, at the end, it's all about presenting meaningful insights in a really clear and cohesive way. So with that kind of philosophy in mind, you know, what does this all mean in the new application? So at the core of this is the new search experience. So what I'm showing you here are the three core screens. You know, on the left-hand side of the screen, you're seeing, for the first time ever, you can simply speak like a human being, type in a phrase, type in a mission statement, type in a grant description. Shorter tends to work better. And we do the processing behind you. Dave will demo that in just a moment. So that's one. On the right-hand side are two more detailed ways to search. On the upper right-hand corner, let me give you a bigger shot of that, is more consistent with the classic FDO where you can do fielded search and reading from left to right, top to bottom. You know, the two most important things to any search are the subject area and the geographic area where you're doing your work. But we also have the core entities that you would search on: population served, organization name, who's who. Again, Dave will demo all of this in just a moment. This classic fielded search, I will say, is the best way to do organization name and who's who searching, as opposed to just typing in a phrase. And then there are additional filters where, as you want to add complexity or narrow down your results, this third component of the search experience will let you do that. So now I am going to hand it over to Dave, and he can give you a demo of how this all works.
Okay, yes, thank you. I'm right here. And I wanted to thank you, Tracy, for that introduction. You see my screen now. You're looking at what the Foundation Directory now looks like, the Foundation Directory Online Professional. And what I'm going to do is put in just an initial search, and then I'm going to send it back to Tracy to tell you a little bit more about some of the results. But a lot of what I do in my job is work with people that are trying to figure out what's the best way to describe what they're doing, and I'll talk to them. As Tracy said, there really isn't a lot of agony that you have to go through to try and figure out if you're using exactly the right words. If I have an arts program in New York and I want to see, is anybody funding arts programs in New York, I can simply type in arts in New York and do a search that way. If I do this initial search from this initial screen, I will come up with a list of results that represent what this particular database has calculated about what it is that I need to search. And you can see the results up here. This little showing results screen is Foundation Directory's interpretation of what I typed in. So it takes the arts and it says, well, it could be arts education, arts museums, visual arts. I'm going to look at all of those. And I'm going to look in New York in the United States to see how many grant makers are funding in that area, how many grants we have in our database that describe arts in New York, how many recipients and how many 990 tax forms mentioned arts in New York. Now, one thing I want to say before I switch this back over to Tracy again, is that this might not be exactly what you're looking for. I don't know if you saw what I just did there, but I went up here and clicked on the advanced search and filters. You remember the first screen that Tracy showed you looked a little bit like this. The second screen had this advanced search and filters that talk about all the different ways that you can narrow this search. So I look at this showing results and I say, well, you know, that's close, but that's not exactly what I'm looking for. What you can do now is go in here and refine it very easily. You don't have to look up a whole list of words to figure out what you're going to put in here instead. You can go here and say, well, New York is fine, that's great, but I want to change this and make it a little bit broader. I want to see the hierarchy of potential terms that I could use to search for arts funding. I erased all the other ones and I just started typing in the box here. So I'm going to click in this box and start typing. So I come up with the beginnings, and I don't know if you can see this as clearly as I can, but it's a hierarchy. Arts and culture is there at the top, and then underneath that are all the different arts subheadings, art services, art councils, arts education, but I just typed in arts to get this. If I'm looking to try and find the most likely funders, I usually want to try and be as broad as possible because the grant makers don't always get as specific as you are in what you're doing. If I'm interested in all the funders that are interested in arts and culture in New York, I can click on that and redo my search, focusing on arts and culture as a whole. So instead of just one of those different terms that I had at the top there, now I have arts and culture, the broadest term in New York, and it comes out with about 10,000 potential grant makers. Now we'll talk a little bit later about narrowing this down, but I want to talk about the results page, and by doing that I'm going to turn that back over to Tracy because she's going to go into some detail about that. So Tracy, I'm going to ask you to take it away again.
Okay, Dave. I'm just going to give it a moment, and now we should be seeing my screen. And we've got the core of the new experience, the results page. So when Dave showed you the 4 boxes, with each of those boxes, you will get the top 5 samples for grant makers and grants and recipients, and then down here is 990s. So let's take a look at the grants page. So the grants page itself, default sort is key to interpreting these results. Our default sort on the grant maker page, rather, I'm sorry, not grants, is grant count. Reason for that, we want to show you first the folks who are most active in that search criteria. So that's the primary sort. The secondary sort is amount funded. So if we had a tie, the amount funded would be the secondary sort. Now, amount funded is a really critical and important new addition to the new FDO. The amount funded is specific to this search results that you have here. Again, we're in arts and culture in New York State. So while the total giving in the last fiscal year that we have reported, this comes from a 990. This is 1 year. The amount that they have funded, and keep in mind FDO goes back to 2003, in arts in New York is nearly $167,000. So $1 million rather, sorry. So that's the amount funded. That is something that did not exist in the classic FDO. We were not able, with the infrastructure technology that we had, to give you funding amounts specific to your search criteria. And this is a really, really important thing to know, right? So what you will know is, again, the default sort here is on grant count, but if you change that filter and said, the amount is more important to me than the activity level, and the activity level being the count, then I would find that the largest funder here is the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation of Arts in New York. Other things that are important on this page. And mind you, to get to this page, I hit the View All button in that initial search results page. For grant makers, we give you some additional filters. You can, if you mark any of these funders as a favorite, you could filter on favorites and only show your favorites. Past funders, and the ever popular, although I will admit it's my least favorite box, of excluding grant makers not accepting applications. That is here in the View All area of the grant maker search results. Let me take a little detour here and tell you why I don't love that box. If I click that box, we would lose a lot of these funders. Yet these funders are giving away boatloads of money, and Dave will show you some networking features that we built in, mainly a LinkedIn integration. Our own development department sees that not as a stop sign, but as a I got to network my way in sign, and it's really important to do that. And I encourage everyone to read the blog by a leader from our own development department on how she thinks about this. I understand it was a way to give you a smaller set of results that was more manageable, but I would encourage you to use these filters, and especially now that we have amount funded, as the best way to prioritize it, and resist using this except when absolutely necessary. We also have past funders icon. You see these little green little icons here that will show you people who have funded your organization in the past, and of course you want to make sure that those folks are contributors each and every year for retargeting, and you can actually filter on that. We also have a set of tools here, printing from PDF, exporting to an Excel sheet, or emailing to a colleague can all be done right from this screen. Now let's take a look at the View All screen for grants. Our default sort for View All is which grants are the most recent. Now you'll notice that we have 2017 grants in this particular search. The only reason we have that is because it is because of our e-reporting program. So if we were most of our data comes from 990 tax forms. If we were solely dependent on 990 tax forms, those returns have not been filed for 2017, so we could not have that. We have deep relationships with foundations, as many of you already know, and because of that we have a system called e-reporting. E-reporting is when a foundation reports directly to us, so we can take out some of the data latency inherent in the sector, because we are in fact coding grants and processing data that had not yet been filed on a 990 form. So that's why you'll see 2017. The secondary sort is grant amount. And then additionally on this page, we allow you to hit favorites only and past funding only. Past funders here, we can see there's, in this set of grants, one of these organizations was a past funder, so there's a lot of new opportunity available. And then again, we have the tools section. So now let's take a look at the recipients. And on each of these pages, there is the show recipient results for, and so you don't lose track of where you are, this is your search criteria in this gray bar. Again, the default search on the recipient list is grant count. Again, it is about showing you those who are the most active amongst that search criteria. There's this little icon here where you could just pop open a grant list right from this screen. Secondary sort is the grant amount received, largest to smallest. And then again, that's showing recipient, and that was on all of these pages, and then your tools section. So now I think I'm going to throw it back to Dave for a deeper dive on some more search examples. So
Okay.
Dave, when you're ready, take it away.
All right, I'm going to do it. And thank you, Tracy. So what I'm going to do is go back to the original search here. And you recall I put in arts in New York and was able to come up with a number of different results. Let's try another type of search just to show you a little bit how you can get into a deep dive. I'm running a healthcare organization in Los Angeles. I may be wondering, like, who is going to fund me? And I might be concerned about getting the most specific funding for the kind of project that I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do is show you that search. And I just did, I typed in healthcare in Los Angeles just to get a start here. And what I do is I come up with, from the search, a list of results as we saw earlier. You notice that it's showing results is always what you look at first. It tells you what the database has interpreted as what you're searching. And what it has interpreted is it's saying you're looking for healthcare clinics in Los Angeles. Now, that might not be what exactly I'm looking for, so I can go down here and make an adjustment. Again, I can go into the advanced search and filters, and I can erase healthcare clinics and type in instead the term health. And I just want to talk about this a little bit more. This hierarchy is very, very important for thinking about searching, because most of the time, as I said, funders are going to be using the broadest term. So if you want to make sure that you include the broadest possible access to potential funders, you can click on a term that is the top of the hierarchy and get everything within it added to your particular term. What you might want to do is go a little further into the hierarchy and maybe think about another term you could add. One thing I should say is that if you're used to Boolean searching, where you have ands and ors to connect things, we don't have that currently available, but within each of the search boxes, so example, within the subject area search box, if you put in another term and you have another orange box in there, it connects them through an or, which means it can be health or whatever that other term would be. Between the boxes, between subject area and geographic focus, you have to think that it's including an and that and would be, you know, it has to be both Los Angeles and health for the search that you're doing. I'm going to redo this search, but first I want to tell you a little bit about geographic focus. There's some confusion sometimes between geographic focus and location. The easiest way to think about it is that geographic focus is where the grant maker is aiming their grants, so where the grants are going to. Location is where the grant maker or recipient is actually located. But sometimes, particularly with national funders, you have national funders that give in all 50 states, and this geographic focus is set to represent that. Used to be you could search in our old foundation directory and choose national as a term, and it wasn't really specific because many national grant makers, particularly corporate grant makers don't give absolutely everywhere. What you want to get a sense of when you do a search is who is giving in your region. So one thing I would suggest, if you are looking to find funders that are giving in Los Angeles, is to think about Los Angeles not necessarily just as a city, but as a region. So if I type in, I erase the original Los Angeles in there, I type in Los Angeles again, I get a choice. I can search Los Angeles County, I can search Los Angeles, California, or I can search Los Angeles metropolitan area. And I think that's what I'm going to do, because I want to find funders that are going to give to that general area, and that is tending to be the way most funders are going to target their giving. So I'll choose that. Now you can make it broader. You can say I want to search California, all the health funding for specifically in the state of California. But it's probably not going to be as exact and as close a match as what you want. Now, some people will say, well, I still want to search national. I would say that given the amount of data, as Tracy said, we're gathering an immense amount of data on grant making. It's actually more helpful for you if you're thinking, well, I have a national program, I want to see where it has an input. It's more useful to you to look at several different regional areas and see who's giving to those to get a big sense of the national funders for your particular issue. But let's do this search. Let's just get healthcare in Los Angeles metropolitan area, and I'll do this search and come up with a list of results. So when I redo the search and it's focusing on health and it's focusing on Los Angeles metropolitan area, you come up with over 6,000 grant makers, almost 7,000 grant makers, 76,785 grants, 3,892 recipients, and many tax forms to go through. I'm going to show you the profiles of each one of these. If you just want to see the grant makers, remember that you can always click View Grant Makers Only or View Grants Only, but an easy way to get into the top grant makers of each one and top grants of each one is to just scroll down. I'm going to choose one. I'm going to choose the Bank of America Charitable Foundation. If I mouse over it, it gives me some basic information on them, but what I want to do is open up their profile, so that's what I'm going to do. Bank of America Charitable Foundation is the profile, and you can find a little bit more about that profile up here at the very top. You can find out, for example, when the information was last updated and the full profile was last changed. You can also find out information on how to download it or email it to yourself or add it to any of the workspaces or any of the reminders that you have for yourself. But here at the top, we have Bank of America Charitable Foundation, some basic contact info, and a really nice portrait of the last 5 years of Bank of America's giving. This is looking at the giving of the entire organization and say, where is the money going and what they're funding over the last 5 years. You get a picture of specifically what topics are being funded. You can see higher education, human services. By the way, you can view each of these with more detail if you want to learn. One thing that this shows you also is that they do fund nationally. In the last 5 years, they have given in just about every state in the union here. And if I mouse over it, it can tell me, for example, they gave 237 grants in Iowa. If I'm in California, there are 9,609 grants that they have given in the state of California. So it gives me a good picture that they are giving on a national basis. It also tells me their general grant size. And you can find here that 4,999 and lower is actually the general grant that they usually give. It's usually not a very big grant that you're going to get from them.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
One quick thing. We're showing right now a map of the U.S., and that's because we're in LA County, or metro area, I should say. But I just want to remind everyone, I know we have questions out there, folks who are looking for funding internationally. If you had done a search in France or Kenya or something like that, you would be seeing that data. So we're only showing a US view right now, but international is definitely there, and the map would be there as well.
Good. Thank you, Tracy. Another thing I want to show you about this is that it gives you an easy way to make connections. If you remember that Tracy is really focused in the revision of the Foundation Directory to making it much more focused on making that connection to the potential funder that you need. And one of the things you need is know who's there to get a connection to them. So we do put the contact information easily linked from the top, and I just clicked on that to come down the bottom here, and it gives you their website and their phone number and their email address and all of the main ways that you would get in touch with them. But another thing that's new up here at the top is a little who's who. If I click on that, it shows me that I can actually connect to the people that work for this organization through LinkedIn. So here are the officers and directors for Bank of America Charitable Foundation. Here's Ann Finucane, for example, that she is the chair and director. If I click on that little LinkedIn link, it's going to take me directly to LinkedIn, my LinkedIn account, and it tells me that Ann Finucane is a third connection for me, which is astonishing to me. I didn't know that I was so closely potentially connected to this person. Also, what I find on the right-hand column is ways that I might be even closer connected. So John Thiel, who's listed over here as a second connection, between John and me, John, who's connected directly to Bank of America, and myself is this other person that I know directly. It's another way of making that established connection, which is very, very important, especially, as Tracy said, when you're trying to make a connection with a funder that maybe does not accept outside applications or has listed themselves as only their pre-selected organizations. You need to get an introduction, and this is a wonderful way of finding that. Let me go back to the top of this. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to chime in. You know, it gets back to that checkbox, and you're going to rule out a lot of funders who you've got someone in your network who can make that introduction, and that quick introduction is going to get you the seat at the table that you rightly deserve. And if you're matched up in terms of the types of issues that these funders support, use your network. It's powerful, and get your rightful seat at the table.
All right, thank you, Tracy. So just to go over a little bit more of the record, just so you know that you're still getting a lot of the information that you would have found before by looking at the old profile screen if you had an earlier version of FDO. But what it's going to do is be much more specific. It's going to show grants that this particular funder has given in this region and enable you to look directly at them. It's going to show you a little bit about their funding interests so that you can see that they focus on different subjects in different areas and with different population groups, support strategies. Further down, it's going to link you into the affiliated companies and other philanthropic organizations that are connected to them, and more about the purpose and background and program areas of the funder. All that detail that you really need to get to know that funder and make that connection to them. One other great thing that is brand new with Foundation Directory Online is other funders to consider. So you've done some searching, maybe you found Bank of America and some other ones, and you wonder who else is like them? Who else does a similar kind of giving across the country or in my particular area? Here's a list of other funders to consider that have compared directly to them based on similar patterns of giving, geographic area, grant amounts. You may not have thought of those. You may not have found them before. Further down, you have how to apply to them, including if they have any RFPs, how their initial approach goes, when their deadlines are, and their specific limitations as they identify them. And still further down, financials on the most recent financial year for this particular funder, and 990s that go back many, many years and give you a sense of exactly what they've paid out and who they are and all of that information. It's a great capsule description of this particular funder. And that's just one of the, go ahead, Tracy.
Yeah, Dave, just a word on the 990s. Yes. When we were coding, I know a lot of people listening to this are used to, poring over 990s. And when we were only processing a couple 100,000 grants a year, you almost had no choice but to sometimes dig into those 990s. With our increased processing power, we are optimistic that the need for you to spend that much time looking at a 990 is going away. We have done that heavy lifting for you. We want you to be able to spend your time more efficiently because we know it's extremely precious. And now that we are, coding over 4 million grants a year, it will be less and less necessary for you to have to go through the painful process of looking at 990s. I'm eager to hear feedback on that from all of you, but our objective is to enable you to work smarter and not harder. So hopefully there will be less and less need for you to have to go through the 990.
I think that's probably a good relief for a number of people. I'm going to go back to the grantmaker search results and begin to talk a little bit not just about the profiles of the grant makers that are listed here. And as Tracy said, remember, you can resort them, you can sort them by the amount funded, you can sort them alphabetically if you want to look through them, and you can print them out and save them using the same types of processes that you used before. What I want to actually get back to is the original search screen here, so I'm going to back up just one more. And what I want to show you is a little bit more detail on the, whoops, I'm sorry, that was not right. Let me go back. I'm going to just redo the search so that I have it.
Or you
search
could
again.
just click on the breadcrumbs too.
It's okay. We got it.
Yep.
So health, Los Angeles metro area. You have the number of grant makers, and we looked at the Bank of America. Let's look down at the grants just for a second. I'm going to scroll down here. I want to show you that these are grants that have been given. It's one grant from one organization to one recipient. And as you know, if you haven't noticed this before, this is including federal as well as foundation and corporation grants. You can choose to look at one particular grant if you want to know more detail about this. And you see that some of these are from 2017, the most recent. If you're interested in what kind of health grant that has been given to the University of Southern California from the Department of Health and Human Services, you can open up this grant detail and get detailed information on what the amount was for, who it came from, and more detail on what it was for. It was a cash grant, and it tells you a little bit about the description of the grant so that you understand, is this comparable? Remember the reason that you're doing this. You're doing this to get a good sense of who is funding and what they're funding, so that when you make an approach to them, you can say, well, I see that you funded something similar to my program. I see that you funded in my area. I see that you, among other organizations, have given to this particular issue. This is all ammunition that you can get, and you can always view all these grants, print them, export them, or email them to yourself. Further down, you find more detail.
And one other question.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes. Sorry to barge in here, but one other question that we've got coming relating to government grants is about state funders and local municipal funders. At this juncture, it's U.S. federal agencies only, so I just want to clarify that point. Okay. And if that's something that's not of interest to you for a variety of reasons, you can filter the U.S. federal funders out of your results. But right now it's just
a little checkbox there that you can say, include the U.S. federal fundings or do not.
Yeah.
All right. I just want to take you down to the recipients there, and then what I want to do is refine this search just so you understand how you can do it to make it even more specific. But first I want to show you a typical recipient. So these are recipients of grants from for the purpose that you're interested in. So you've done the search, health, Los Angeles metropolitan area, that region. If you look at the recipients here, these are recipients for in that subject area, and they're organized by the ones who've gotten the most grants related to this. So I can open one like Cedars-Sinai and find out about who is giving to Cedars-Sinai. Let's imagine that I'm doing this kind of search, and I see Cedars-Sinai, and I realize, oh yeah, I'm just like that organization. I'm just like that medical center. I want to know who else is giving them money. Well, we have detailed information on grants they've given specifically for the thing that you're interested in from 2017 on back. We have over 1,800 or over 1,700 grants that have gone specifically to them. It tells you who they are, and it tells you the kind of thing that they tend to get grants for. In this case, hospital care. It gives you more detail on them. It links to their 990s, the IRS returns if you have an interest, and it tells you more detail about where they're located, what county, and their website, all of that detailed information. So what you're getting from doing this kind of search, and really this is all from just one search, is full details on the grant makers interested in it, the grants that have already been given, most recent back to 2003, the number of recipients in the area that you're interested in that have gotten them. If you wanted to refine this a little bit more, let me show you how you can do that. By the way, we did this original search, if you recall, using that main search, interface, the first page that you come to. Then I went ahead and opened up the advanced search and filters. And you can see that you can get into this and search them a number of different ways. If you wanted to add still more filters, down here underneath these first 6, the little additional filters. And it enables you to add in specifics. Say, for example, you weren't just interested in health in Los Angeles, but you wanted to do building. You wanted to do building and renovation. You want to do a capital campaign. What about finding the funders that are most interested in that? You can go down here into support strategy, and you see I typed the word building and came up with building and renovations and building acquisition, but an overarching, the top of the hierarchy is capital and infrastructure. If I click that and then add that to my search now, what I'm going to find is not just the funders that have an interest in health, but funders that have an interest in health and give for capital and infrastructure in Los Angeles. And it does narrow it down precipitously. But it takes you down to grant makers that have stated or examined interest in funding building and renovation, capital and infrastructure. And you can see it's prioritized in the list that you get. The ones that give the most towards that are at the top. Have given the most grants from our database. This is a wonderful way of continuing to narrow down your search and find the funders that are most likely to give for what you need. I want to clear this out because I want to show you, if you have the name of a grant maker and you want to find a little bit more about them. So say you're here and you're in the Find Funding and you want to find out just about one particular organization or one particular grant maker. Say it's the Ford Foundation. You've heard of the Ford Foundation. If you go down here to organization and start typing, what you're going to get is every match. It's going to give you organization names that match up with this. A lot of times when I'm searching a grant maker, I don't always know. I can't remember everybody's initials. I can't remember if it was EW or EG, but I do know the last names of the different people. And what you can do is start typing with what you know, and it will give you selections, and then you can go ahead and find the one that most likely matches up with you. Another thing you can do when you get into this is it doesn't have to be just a grant maker. Remember, we looked at Cedars-Sinai, and that was a very informative search. I'm going to do Cedars-Sinai, and am I spelling it correct? Yeah, there it is. Cedars-Sinai, and this will give me all of the different Cedar and Cedars-Sinais. You notice that I did it without the S. That doesn't matter because what I found here is the Cedars-Sinai. It corrects it slightly for you so that you're able to find what you need to find. So I can search to see this is the recipient that I'm interested in. I do a search and I can find out about all the grants that they have received. Just to cap it, for those of you who are not familiar with some of the other searches, don't hesitate to do these kind of searches to narrow down. But remember, the more of these boxes that you fill, the more you're going to limit your search because it's connecting everything with an and. So if I say I want to see arts and culture, and I want to make sure that I'm looking for funding in Cleveland, I'm a big fan of Cleveland, so I am putting in Cleveland, and I want to make sure it has a geographic focus of Cleveland, and I'm sorry, I'm typing this a little bit off today. Not sure what's going on there, maybe my typing, but the population served, if I want a particular age group that I want to search, you can add in more terms, but the more terms that you add in, the more narrow that is going to be. So I can choose specific age groups, or I can choose one age group. I can say I want to see seniors in a particular area, and it's going to give me seniors. So arts and culture for seniors, I can do that search, but it's going to keep narrowing the more of these boxes that I fill in. All right. Tracy, I'm going to turn this back over to you. Is there anything that you want me to show on the database, or do you want to just go back to your slides?
I'll just say one thing here and then hand the controls back over to me so we can wrap this
Sure.
up. But Dave showed organization name and went to the search box. And for organization name and for who's who, staff names, trustees names, etc., these boxes are probably your best bet versus just a text result. So that's it. Let's, if you could hand the control back to me.
Sure. I'm going to do that. And turn this back over to her to finish.
Okay. All right. So I just want to, again, thank everyone for taking some precious time out of your day. And just want to kind of summarize what we've talked about here. We've demonstrated, at least at a high level with some detail, all you can do in search. I do want to call out during business hours, there is a chat now. We are always here. People, Dave is oftentimes who you'll get if you click the chat now. But we have other people like Dave, and they're experts in doing this work, and we're at the ready to help you, or you can reach us through email or call us. But we're here to help, and we want to do that. But before we leave you, I want to kind of give you some insights as to what's next. We talked a little bit about organization and name and how those fielded boxes are the best way to do that. We are currently working on more of a one-click solution to get you to those boxes. We know, after you've done those initial searches to get your list of prospects, when you come back the next day, you may just be hammering out looking at specific funders. So we'll make that experience a little more efficient for you in the very near future. Also, with that same goal of making the experience a little more efficient for you, when you start looking at a grant maker profiles and you've got your search results and you just want to go from one profile to the next and keep plowing through them, a next or a previous button would be really useful. So that is on the verge of being released. Right now you do have to use those breadcrumbs to go back to your search results to pick the next one, but expect to see a next and previous button from the profile screen very soon. And the 3 charts that are on the top of the profiles, you can click on those to drill down for more detail. So right now we've got some under the hood things that make those results maybe not super precise to the results that you get in a search itself. So the counts may be slightly off. So we're working on some fine-tuning to get that all just rock solid. It's all still very valid and useful information, but we're going to do some data improvements there to make it even better. And then recipient profiles. So searching from the framework of a recipient is now easier than it's ever been before. One of the reasons we did that was, we looked at pretty common searches, arts and culture and health, in the examples that we went through today. But oftentimes what people do is kind of quirky and kind of specific, right? There is, the power of the broad and search is really powerful as opposed to filtering and being extremely precise in your initial search. But in talking to nonprofits, oftentimes people struggle with that concept of how to describe their work. But when I ask those very same people to give me an example of other organizations like them, they don't struggle at all. So we think, doing an org search on some organizations, nonprofits who do work like you do to get your head around what your search criteria would be is extremely powerful. So researching by recipient became important in the new FDO. But the profile that we launch with will become even more powerful. So we are currently working to enhance the recipient profiles and give you some visualizations, some chart visualizations that will help you understand and maybe benchmark yourself against a peer organization. So what type of funders fund them? Is it significantly different than those who fund you? And does that difference shed light on some opportunities of certain type of funders that you could go after? So look for some enhancements to recipient profiles. But the thing that I think, if there's one thing I want to leave you with today, it's that all of the work that we did to change the interface for FDO is because we listen intently, because we listen for where you get stuck in this process. Our goal really is to take as much friction out of this process for you as possible, so that the precious little time you have to do this work can be the most productive time possible. And to do that, that means we need to listen intently to what you tell us, where you get stuck, what you'd like to see, and solve for those problems, remove those obstacles to doing this work. So please talk to us, tell us the good, tell us the bad. There is no, sometimes I hear people say, well, I don't want to be critical, but, and some people just let us have it, right? It's all valuable. We value it. We value it a great deal, and we want you to keep talking to us, and I promise you we will keep listening and take your feedback into account. So with that, I'm going to call it a day, and I'm going to thank you very much for your time and attention. Happy fundraising, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care.